This is Michael Popok, Legal AF. Donald Trump, that great businessman, he may owe the Internal Revenue Service and you and me as taxpayers over $100 million for phony double-dipping tax deductions arising out of a Chicago shiny tower that he tried to build back in the early 2000s. In fact, for those that don't follow, outside of our audience, the last time Donald Trump actually and his company built a building was back in 2008 and 2009 with the Trump International Tower in Chicago. It was also in an episode of The Apprentice, so you may remember it from that. But that's the last time Donald Trump ever built anything along the way. In fact, according to audit and IRS documents obtained by both the New York Times and ProPublica, the first time in 11 years that Donald Trump actually had positive income that he hadn't used phony write-offs to cover up was in 2018. For 11 years straight, he operated at a loss, mainly from double-dipping losses he took for the Chicago Tower. I'm going to break it all down for you now. I'll tell you what I think could happen next. Now, Donald Trump, his financial affairs are public. He owes $465 million running with interest, let's call it at even $500 million, to the New York Attorney General and the people of the state of New York for persistently, fraudulently running his companies in New York for over 10 years. He owes E. Jean Carroll upwards of $100 million for not one, but two sexual assault punitive damage cases in New York. And so you got that going on. Now you've got this $100 million audit issue. How did it come about? Well, Donald Trump announces in the early 2000s he's going to build his first building like in 20 years. And the last building that he's built, frankly, this Chicago Tower. It's going to have, 500 or 600 units. It's going to have condos. It's going to have residential. It's going to have all sorts of things. And he goes to banks. Goes to Deutsche Bank and he goes to Fortress Capital and he borrows up to $800 million. Now, at some point, he tries to sell the units. And instead of selling out 850 units during the recession back in 2008 and 2009, Donald Trump sells 131 units. That's a big miss. We call that in the business. You want to sell 830 and you sell 131. So Donald Trump tried to use a tactic called a worthless deduction. Now, Donald Trump, not to be confused, Donald Trump, maybe because he was confused, talked a lot about the worthless provision and the worthless clause that was in his personal financial condition report, his statement of financial conditions in the New York Attorney General case, that his financial statements couldn't be relied upon and they were basically worthless and you had to do your own due diligence if you were going to interact with him or be a counterparty with him or lend to him. By the way, that's not how a worthless clause works, and Judge Engoron told him that. This is not a worthless clause I'm talking about. This is a worthless deduction. Donald Trump claimed after 3 or 4 years of trying that his entire investment, and it was only about $50 million, plus all the money he put in there from these Deutsche Bank and Fortress Capital, was effectively worthless, zeroing out the entire amount of the investment in the Chicago Tower. That allowed him to take over a let me get it right here for you, a $650 million tax loss that he then spread out over a number of years, which is why he never paid any taxes for 11 years running, because he never showed any income. At the moment when he started to earn new income on, where else? The Apprentice, where he started making in 2009 about $33 million from being on The Apprentice. In 2010, $44 million. In 2011, $51 million. Again, all from documents in Donald Trump's own organization and audit from the IRS obtained by ProPublica and the New York Times. After he made that $120 or $130 million of revenue for The Apprentice, if you ever wondered why he did it, that's why he did it. He didn't want to pay taxes. And he'd already used all of the Chicago Tower to get rid of the prior 11 years of taxes. So what did he do? This is the double dipping. He took the tower, he transferred it into another entity he controlled, basically moving the tower and its losses from his left pocket to his right pocket, and then try to take another $168 million of losses he had already taken completely in the first transaction, and apply it to write off and lower his tax bill to zero for the new money he made in The Apprentice. Get it? Every dollar he made in The Apprentice for that 3-year period, which was the height, he found a way to double dip with the Chicago Tower which he had already declared his investment to be worthless and had already applied all those tax losses, he created new phony tax losses of another $168 million to offset all the income he made on The Apprentice. Get it? That's the double dip. That's the $100 million tax bill once the IRS continues their audit and gets to the bottom of the worthless declaration. Now, Donald Trump and his people around him, like, the now twice jailed chief financial officer Alan Weisselberg and other quote unquote tax experts that Eric Trump brags about, they knew this was coming. In fact, they never put the Chicago Tower and Donald Trump's investment in it or the value of it in his personal financial statement, his statement of financial condition, which was at the heart of the New York Attorney General investigation, because they thought that that would be inconsistent with his worthless declaration. You can't say something's worthless and get several $100 million worth of tax credit and tax deductions to lower your tax bill to zero for a dozen years running. I mean, zero. Mr. and Mrs. America, when you're thinking about voting for Donald Trump, I'll just let you know, you paid more in taxes, no matter what you did for a living, than Donald Trump ever did, okay? Because of these tax dodges and these tax schemes, okay? So you have all of that going on. And then you've got the inconsistent position would be now you suddenly declare that the Chicago Tower has value to add to Donald Trump. So he was stuck. Even Donald Trump, who committed fraud as adjudged by Judge Engoron, didn't go that far to put the Chicago Tower as a positive asset on his financial statement because they're worried about the Internal Revenue Service. And they should be, because if what ProPublica and the New York Times and I've just outlined is right, Donald Trump owes the American people over $150 million. This is why he never wanted to release his tax returns. The only president in the modern era never to release his tax returns. I mean, he likes to talk about George Washington not releasing his tax returns, but there was no Internal Revenue Service then either, and there weren't tax returns to file. Just a little historical note. But Donald Trump is the only modern American president, and now we know why. Because he didn't want the average people. Every time we've gotten our hands on a glimmer, we've seen a glimmer of his tax returns. The New York Times got their hands on it. Mary Trump got her hands on it. ProPublica got their hands on it. And we start looking at a snapshot of his financial condition. And so too did the Manhattan District Attorney's Office through Cy Vance and the New York Attorney General through Letitia James. We see this. 11 years of not paying any taxes because he took the Chicago Tower that I just described, deducted it down to worthless, declared it worthless, took the tax deduction. And then when he ran out of the tax deduction, but he had all of this giant income up to $130 million on The Apprentice, and he had to get rid of it and sink it fast, he said, aha, I'll conjure up new losses for the same tower I already did 5 years ago by moving the tower from one vehicle that I own, Donald Trump owns, to the DJT Trust, where he has all of his other assets, and then we'll come up with new losses and offset income there, and I don't have to pay taxes. All right? So there's two things I want people to understand when they listen to this hot take. One is Donald Trump hasn't built a building since 2009. That building was the Chicago Tower I just described, which was also featured one season in The Apprentice, right? That's one. Secondly, he didn't pay taxes for 11 years running. And even in the year in 2018, when he had quote unquote positive income, it was $1 million off of real positive income of a couple $100 million. Now, some people say, well, he's so smart. I want to see his presidency restored. Let's put that kind of guy. Anybody that can rip off me and rip off the American people and get away with it, that's my kind of president. Is that what people are thinking? Is that why the polls are so whacked? That's the only thing I can do to explain it. I mean, if people hit their heads and they've forgotten the kleptocracy that was in office under Donald Trump, they think that's fair. They think that's business as usual in the presidency. That's what our founding fathers envisioned for a pilfering president, that he was going to rip off the American people, violate the emoluments clause, force people doing business with the government to line his pockets while he was in office, not pay any taxes. What American president can look the American people in the eye and say, you should be proud of me. I found a way not to pay any taxes. Really? That's something to be proud of, the American president? I just don't get it. I just don't get the collective amnesia for some people that are continuing to support Donald Trump. And I got to just do what I'm always doing. I'm shining a light on it without blowing smoke or sunshine. One place, MeidasTouch Network. Help them get to 3 million free subscribers. We're building this network with our bare hands. Here, you can hear me. I'm building it with my bare hands. We have no outside investors. You are the network you've been looking for. It's right here. Free subscribe. Get the MeidasTouch Network to 3 million. If you like what I'm doing, leave me a thumbs up. Leave me a comment. I've been known to talk back. We'll have a dialogue. Go over to my body of work over on the MeidasTouch YouTube. Look under playlists for Michael Popok. You'll find all my body of work there, about 1,200 or so hot takes just like this one. And then join us on Legal AF. You wondered why we called it? After hearing this story, you now know why the podcast is labeled Legal AF. It's on Wednesdays and Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, only on this YouTube channel for MeidasTouch, and then on wherever you get your audio podcast from. So until my next hot take, until my next Legal AF, this is Michael Popok reporting. Heary, heary, Legal AF Law Breakdown is now in session. Go beyond the headlines and get a deep dive into the important legal concepts you need to know, and we discuss every day on Legal AF. Exclusive content you won't find anywhere else, all for the price of a couple of cups of coffee. Join us at patreon.com/legalaf. That's patreon.com/legalaf.